What's up, Tigers? How you doing? I hope life is great wherever you are. This is Spanish Grandmaster Pepe Cuenca. And this morning, while I was having breakfast, I said to myself, okay, let's solve another user question. And the user, Woody Allen, was asking the following question. He was showing some gambit in the board, and he was asking, what can I do against this gambit in decimetric English? Well, this is the well-known Kasparov Gambit. And it's called Kasparov Gambit because Kasparov brought it back to the elite tournaments when it was supposed to be not the best choice for black. But it's a really interesting gambit, and it comes after the following moves. So c4, the English opening, c5, symmetric, knight f3, knight f6. And I have to thank this user, Woody Allen, because in this particular order, I am an English opening player, and in this particular order I have been playing my whole life knight c3 in order to avoid precisely the Kasparov Gambit. But I have to thank this user because he has forced me to study deeply a recipe against it. I'm gonna show you a whole repertoire against the Kasparov Gambit. So it continues after d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, and e5. White plays normally knight b5. This is some sort of pelican, right? But with the pawn on c4 and not on e4, right? And Kasparov Gambit comes after d5, sacrificing a pawn, because after c takes e5, some of you could be asking, Pepe, why can't just take the pawn on d5 with my knight? Well, this would be a huge blunder, because after the move queen takes d5, boop, ra-da-da, black actually just loses on the spot, because after queen takes d5, knight c7, you just regain the piece and you are just a piece up. So that's why after c takes e5, black normally plays bishop c5, and of course his plan is to lead in development, and the bishop is extremely well placed in this diagonal, and later in the future you want to recapture the pawn on the e5. So a few remarks that I want to explain to you guys at this point. So first of all, we got to be very careful about the f2 pawn, right, about Facundo. And the second remark is that this knight on b5 is actually not so well placed. If you continue with the natural development knight b to c3, later on this knight has to come back to a3, and this is not very good. So that's why we're going to recommend knight 5 to c3 in this moment. Normally black castles, and then here there are many options here. For example, e3, even h3 has been tried, but we are going to recommend g3. Whenever I try to prepare some line against some defense or whatever, I normally, of course, use the database, and then I try to see the percentage of victories with each line. And clearly g3 is the most successful line, because it has the 62% of victories with the white pieces, which is actually quite good. So g3, our idea is rather simple. We're gonna develop our bishop via g2 and then go short castle here in this position. There are already plenty of possibilities for black here in this position. The main line is queen to b6, but we have to analyze deeply many possibilities for black. Another remark here in this position is actually that if we manage to play bishop g2, short castle, and then maybe e4, we'll have a healthy pawn up. So that's why in many cases black tries to play e4 in order to stop us from playing e4. And then this pawn could be much weaker without this guy here supporting him, right? So beside queen to b6, there are many other choices. For example, rook e8, bishop f5, e4, knight to g4, which is a really interesting move, and queen to b6. So let's start with the first of the secondary lines. So rook e8. Of course, the idea is just to play e4 and maybe later e3. Why not? So we play bishop g2, e4, short castle, and now there are two main possibilities for black. The first one is to play e3, which could actually scare us. We actually don't know the position. The second one is just to continue development with bishop f5. Let's start with the most straight approach, which is to play e3. There is no problem. We can just take this guy here. Bishop takes e3, bishop takes e3, f takes e3. The bad news for us is that we have just lost Facundo. but sometimes it's not the end of the world. So black plays knight to g4 in order to capture on e3 with bad consequences for us. There's no possibility of defending this guy, so that's why we got to play queen to d2, knight takes e3, and rook to f4. This is actually extremely nice square for the rook. Our plan is just to play knight a3 and knight to c4. So let's say queen b6. We don't want to have any troubles on this diagonal. So we play just king h1, knight to d7, and knight a3. Intending to go knight c4, exchanging this dangerous piece from black, and then we will have a healthy extra pawn up. Right, so this position is extremely good for white, and the other choice is after e4 short castle is to play bishop f5. Here knight e3 is interesting, also knight d2, but we're going to recommend knight a3. This knight could jump to c4, e3, etc. And after knight bd7, even the move bishop e3 is completely good for white. And some of you guys would be asking, what are you doing, Pepe? Black is gonna ruin our structure after taking on e3. What are you doing? Don't play chess, man. Just play something else, but not chess. You don't have any idea about this sport. Well, the thing is, after bishop g6, this queen is gonna be extremely well centralized in d4, protecting e3, protecting d5. Cannot be kicked from there. And then we can continue by bringing a knight to c4, maybe b3, rook c1, rook d1, etc. Position is extremely great for white. So this is the first line that comes after rook e8 here. As I told you, there are many other choices. For example, bishop f5 here in this position. The idea is pretty similar. You want to play e4. So bishop g2, e4, short castle. And of course, there are many transpositions in this opening. For example, you play rook e8 now. We would be analyzing the same line as we did just 1 minute ago. So that's why we're going to take a look on other moves. For example, knight b to d7. And now knight d2 is also possible. You don't have to be scared about the move e3 without the rook being on e8, for example, because after e3 you just take, bishop takes, king h1, and now you're attacking the bishop on f5. Whenever this bishop retreats to g6, we just jump to c4, having a lot of fun on c4, removing this guy from e3 after bishop c1, rook c1, e4 later, queen d4. Black is just fine. White is just much better, right? So, I mean, e3 is not dangerous, and if you play rook e8, now you can just play knight to c4, the knight is going to come to e3, and then after bishop g6, queen to b3, attacking b7, later we can play bishop d2, and complete development by bringing the rooks to the center. There are also many nasty ideas related by bringing to this bishop to h3, where there are so many pieces in this diagonal and could be extremely dangerous for black, right? So this is what happens after bishop f5. Let's take in account other moves. For example, e4 here. It has been tried in 60 games more or less. So bishop g2, and now of course after bishop f5 or rook e8 we will be transposing to the previous lines. But now let's analyze some other moves. For example, the strike approach e3, which is now even worse than previously, because now we can just take, and after knight g4, queen d4, centralizing and defending, and after queen b6, the same idea. We just play queen to d4, and after queen takes b2, just knight d1. This defensive move, which is extremely interesting. Now, whenever this queen takes on d4, e takes e4, this knight is going to come to c3, this pawn is going to come to e4, and now white would be much better with all these guys on the center, having a lot of fun dancing tango in the center of the board, while all this knight on b8, c8, they're just extremely sad. So no problems after e3 straight away, and the other choice here for black is to play queen e7. But after short castle e3, there's no trouble again, because now we can just take, and after knight g4, king h1, bishop takes e3. Actually, black is not threatening to jump to f2. Let's prove it. Knight a3, knight f2. This can be met by rook takes and e3. An extremely interesting move, which is actually threatening to just play queen e2. And some of you could be asking, Pepe, again, this guy hasn't got a clue about chess. This is so stupid, this Spanish guy. Why are you guys hiring Pepe to do some chess stuff in Chess 24? put him to clean the tables or whatever, to make the coffees for Jan, to bring Jan the food, or I don't know. But the thing is, after bishop e3, it's not so stupid, because we're gonna play d6, and now after queen is 6, just takes on e3, and then knight d5. This is a forced variation. Queen d5, knight e7, king h8, takes, and bishop b7, regaining the exchange, taking on a8. The queen is coming to f3, the knight is coming to c4, a pawn to b3, a rook to d1, and this is a healthy pawn up with a postpawn on d6, which is extremely dangerous for black. Alright, so this happens after e4 and then e3 or queen e7, and again, we got two more possibilities. Knight to g4, which is extremely interesting, and the other move, which is queen b6, which we will analyze later. Now, of course, we got to play e3, and black's idea is just to play f5, bringing Facundo to the action, and now threatening to go f4. If we do something stupid like a3, f4 probably is winning. So we got to play prophylactically, and that's why we play bishop e2, avoiding f4, since the knight on g4 is hanging, and we force back this knight to f6, right? And after knight f6, we're gonna play this very typical move a3 in this position. a3 is extremely typical because now we're gonna force black's bishop to retreat. This bishop on this diagonal is very, very dangerous, and if black wants to stop that by playing a5, he will create a lot of weaknesses on the light squares, right? So that's why normally black doesn't play a5. Let's say if black tries to play a5, knight d2, it's very difficult to take on d5, right, with this king on g8. Then after taking everything, black would lose the queen after playing bishop c4. So that's why knight b d7, knight c4, and if black tries to play b5, we just don't let it do it by playing knight to b5. As you can see, many weaknesses on the light squares, and this is extremely good position for white. So that's why after a3, black normally plays knight b to d7, and now we continue with our plan, b4. Normally this bishop doesn't retreat to b6, because black's plan is normally related by bringing this knight to b6 and try to put some pressure on the d5 pawn, which is not very well supported by white, because with the bishop on g2 would be much harder to recapture it, but with the bishop on e2 actually is kind of a weakness, this pawn on d5. So that's why black plays bishop d6, and now knight d2, the natural square for this knight, intending to go to c4. Black has to stop it, and that's why he plays normally knight b6. There are like 14-50 games with this line in my database, right? And the thing is, black cannot take this pawn yet on d5, because there are many troubles in this diagonal. Let's say if you now take on d5, would be an extremely extremely huge blunder, because after taking queen b3, bishop e6, bishop c4, still black can play bishop e7, but after rook d1 you are threatening so many things, like knight f3, and then pressure here, there is a ping here, there is a ping here, there are so many pins everywhere, boom 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 boom. Black has to resign, more or less. So that's why it's difficult to take on d5, sorry, knight b6, bishop b2, and now if you play king h8, it's not that easy to take this pawn again because of knight c4, and again you will have a lot of pressure on the d file and on the e5 pawn. Let's say queen e7, and another typical idea is to reinforce the pawn on d5 by playing e4 here. f4, and the thing is, this attack is not that dangerous, it's a clear advantage for white. So bishop h3, sorry, rook e1, and after takes, h takes, black can't jump to g4, e4 is protected. This is much better for white, right? So where are we? Bishop b2. The other possibility is to play bishop d7, but now after queen to b3 and let's say f4, we can just go short castle, and after bishop a3, rook c1, takes, and again this position is very good for white. There are many knight d4 ideas related, and let's say after queen d7 you can just play knight b5, and you can't never jump to g4 because there's knight e4 protecting f2, attacking d6. After queen a5 there's just knight d6. So white is just much better, right? The attack is very interesting, and it could be dangerous, but it's clear that white is better, right? All right, so let's go back to move number 8, if I'm not wrong. So here, let's go back. This is what comes after knight g4, and let's just analyze the main line that follows after queen to b6. Of course, this forces white to play e3, and now again different choices. The main line is bishop g4. There are other possibilities like bishop f5, e4 here, rook d8, and as I'm telling you, bishop g4 is the main line. So let's start with bishop f5. The idea is to support e4, right? So bishop g2, e4, short castling, knight b to d7, knight to d2. It's very important to put pressure on e4, so this knight can't jump to e5. We are forcing black to defend this guy with rook f8, right? And now knight c4, queen e6 and queen b3. And black plays rook a d8, intending to go knight e5, and then after recapturing, try to put some pressure on our pawn on d5. By the way, guys, I can't move my arms. You know, I was swimming yesterday in the swimming pool like for 1 hour, and then I'm not that used to, you know, I'm gonna die, man. But summer is coming. We got to be fit, and also for the tournaments, right? So I'll keep suffering swimming. You remember that guy from Guinea in the Olympiad? It was very funny. So I'm like him, but even 100 times worse, right? So I struggle to reach the other side of the pool. All right, so rook a d8, and now you could play rook d1, but I think this endgame, giving back the pawn, is actually very healthy and very interesting. You are threatening to jump on d6, that's why black has to play knight e5, takes, and e3. And I think this position is a little bit better for white. We got this monster on b2, we got a nice square on d4. This pawn could be a weakness. Bishop e3 doesn't work because of knight c3. So I think white is a little bit better, and you are playing basically for free. So after e3, bishop a5 is a move. The other move is e4. e4 here in this position. Bishop g2. After bishop f5, we would be transposing. So rook e8, again, bishop f5 transposes, and let's say knight a6, which was played in some game. If a3 normally has a lot of sense, makes a lot of sense, so in this position even more, right? Because b4 is unstoppable, so that's why after bishop f5, b4, whoa, what did I do? Bishop f5, b4, bishop d6, knight to d2, intended to jump to c4, and it turns out that black can recapture the pawn on d5, but paying a price, the bishop pair. And this position is extremely nice for white. Look at this bishop here on d4. He is the star of the disco. He dances with everyone there, you know. Everybody knows him, you know. This guy is fucking amazing. The knight on a6 is misplaced completely, right? The bishop on g2 is well placed defending our king. e4 is a weakness. So what else do you want in life? You want a nice house? You want a nice woman or man with you? It doesn't matter if you have this bishop on d4. You are the boss of the world, right? So e4 is the other choice. You guys see, I have here my notes because I don't want to forget any line. A move that doesn't make any sense is rook d8, because it's going to be extremely hard to take that pawn on e5, and then we're going to support it with e4 at some point. And this is just very good for white. So rook d8 doesn't make any sense to me. And let's just go to the main line with bishop g4. Now it's very important to note that remove the queen is actually a big mistake, because now, since the bishop is not on g2, bishop f3 comes, attacking the rook, and then giving black a great advantage, right? So that's why we can't play queen c2 or queen b3, etc. We got to play bishop e2 or f3, and f3 clearly weakens this diagonal, so that's why everybody plays here bishop e2, and this is going to be our recommendation as well. And again, two different alternatives here for what? For black. You could take, which is normally what black does, you can play bishop a3, avoiding white from castling. The problem with bishop a3 is that there is a really strong move, which is g4 here in this position, trapping this guy on a3. And if black doesn't do anything, we just go rook g1 and rook g3 and take this guy, which has an extremely nice curry sauce on his head, right? Let's say head. And if you do nothing like rook d8, rook g1 already is giving a lot of trouble to black. So bishop b4 and rook g3, and basically you can't stop white from taking on a3. So white is just winning, right? So that's why black has to play here knight f to d7 in order to play Facundo. Again, Facundo saving his colleagues, right, by playing a5. So this bishop is gonna go out. But after a3, for example, f5, b4 takes, and e4 followed by bishop e3, white is again much better. So that's why after bishop e2, black takes on e2, queen to e2, and in order to stop e4, black e4, right? And tries to regain the pawn on d5. Here I'm gonna recommend the typical move a3 in this position. Right? Of course, again, the same idea. If black plays a5, then a lot of weaknesses on the light square. If not, we're going to play b4. The knight is going to come by at d2. The bishop is well placed on this diagonal. And black, of course, is going to do something in the meantime, right? And we have to stop his ideas. Again, here, the most natural move is rook e8, protecting e4. There are many other alternatives. For example, a5 was played in one game against Lázaro Bruzón, the Cuban player, or rook d8. Rook d8 again doesn't make any sense because after knight d2, e4 is attacked. Yes, you can take on d5, but I take on e4, and this is a clear pawn up. So that's why rook d8 doesn't make any sense to me. a5 is also very obvious. Let's say knight d2, rook e8. This is the game Bruzón against Langer from Calgary 2016. And then you just go sheer castling. After knight b7, you can just play b3. The thing is, you're gonna develop this bishop by a b2, and black only interesting plan is related by bringing this knight to e5, which is not possible because e4 would be hanging. So white is much better again. Then let's move to the with rook e8 here. So to d2. And again, the main move is by far knight b to d7, but there have been some attempts like related by bringing the queen to c7, a prophylactic move against b4, because now b4 would be made by taking on b4 since the knight on c3 is hanging. But I really like the idea that Vidit, the super grandmaster from India, suggested in this position. He played g4 here, trying to put some pressure on e4, right? We want to play g5, and then whenever this knight retreats, we'll just take on e4. And here is already a tough position to think with black if you don't know the position. There are different moves: queen e5, queen d7, or h6. h6 is already a clear mistake, and this is what happened in Vidit's game, because after h4, black is already in a lot of trouble. You are playing g5. His opponent tried to play queen e5. This looks like stupid, but after knight c4, queen c7, his idea was that after g5, whenever this knight retreats, e4 wouldn't be pressed, right, with two pieces, but only with one. So he played knight h7, g takes, g6, but after b4, b was already crashing, and he finished his opponent very soon. So that's why the other alternative would be queen e5 here in this position. Sorry, queen e5, but after knight c4, knight, queen to g5, d6, the position is clearly better for white, since now you can't take on d4, because after queen takes, knight takes, the knight is gonna come to d5. So d6 is not a move to make a queen, but instead to habilitate the d5 square for our beautiful Courcelle from c3, right? So this is what happens after queen c7. And let's go with the main line, knight b to d7. We're going to recommend b4. Now the bishop goes the whole way back to f8. And now short castle. Again, another landmark point. So here there are many, well, 3 or 4 possibilities. So people have played queen c7, rook a c8, queen d8, also queen d6, but this is not so human. So let's try to analyze all these possibilities. Queen c7 was seen in a game between Levon Aronian and Emil Sutovsky. Sutovsky played this with black, but after bishop b2, he went knight b6. Now white is clearly better after knight b5, queen d7. And now we suggest an improvement over Levon's Aronian game. He went d6 straight away, but bishop f6, it's very natural and very good. After g takes f6, d6, white is just much better. The thing is, we're intending to go to c7. There are many ideas related to attacking the black king, and also black can't take on d6 because after bishop d6, rook fd1, there are many troubles in this pin, right? Related with this pin. You can take on d6, then on e4, right? And black is just much worse. So let's say if you play rook e6, you can play even knight takes e4, right? So white is crashing, so that's why queen c7 is not very good. Instead, black could play queen d8 or rook c8, probably both lines would transpose to each other. So let's just analyze queen to d8. Black's plan is related to bringing this knight to b6 and then put a lot of pressure on d5. So black plays rook d1, looking with x-rays to this queen, rook c8, bishop b, and now a6. a6 is a really important move because if you go knight b6 straight away, d6 actually is very good. Now after bishop takes knight b5, and black is in a lot of troubles, right? So that's why a6, and now we got to do something because black is playing knight b6 and we could have some trouble with the d5 pawn. I'm gonna give you two possibilities. With the first one you will reach an endgame where you can never lose, but it's also tough to put pressure. And the second option is much more interesting, I would say, because the game will continue in a complicated way. So let's show you first the first line. So black is playing knight b6, so we play knight c4. Black plays b5, which could look to you as a very bad move because after knight e5, now c6 very weak. But black's plan is not now to come to b6, but instead to come to e5. Now e4 is not hanging because there is not a knight on g2, so he wants to jump here, and there could be a lot of attack for black if we allow that. So that's why we got to play knight c6, and after knight c6, d takes c6, queen b6. Black has managed to regain the c6 pawn. Carlitos is a bad guy, you know. Police has called me. They have told me that Carlitos, you know, he was doing some graffitis in my town. You know, I had to get him, you know, and tell him, you know, Carlitos, it's good that you try to create a queen on chess games, you know, but you have to behave in real life, you know. Okay, talking bullshit. So a4 and queen b takes e4, knight takes e4, queen c6, and knight c5. And black has here two options. Black can go queen b5 or bishop takes c5. Queen b5, I think this endgame is possible to put some pressure on black because we can play bishop d4 and then put some pressure on b5, but still, it's not very much, but it's something. But the thing is, black can take actually on c5, b takes e5, queen takes e5, takes, and this is the endgame I was talking about. Should be a draw, but the structure is ruined for black, so I've lost these kind of positions so many times. So, of course, you play without the risk. The other option that I want to show you is in this position after a6, but playing d6 here. So black can take on d6 because of knight e4. So black plays rook c6. The pawn is gonna fall, but after knight b3, rook takes, knight a4. I would say I prefer white, right? The Jin says this is plus 0.4, 0.3. The reasons: this guy is a monster here. You got some nice squares for these knights, right? d4, c5, and then let's say queen takes, rook c1. In many cases, you're gonna use the c file, and white is a little bit better, and there's a lot of life going on in this game. So, yeah, let's go back to the landmark point. So after rook c8, this is the main line. This is gonna transpose to the line that we just saw, because black normally plays queen d8 here in order to play knight to b6. Remember the two recipes, d6 or knight c4, depending on your opponent or on your day maybe. If you are on a fighting mode, just play d6. If you think that a draw could be okay, but still you can put some pressure, just play knight c4. So this being my recipe against the Kasparov Gambit, I think I will be using it in my repertoire. Of course, you will see my games, some tournament, if they play against me with the Kasparov Gambit, I will use some of these ideas. I hope you too in your chess tournaments. I hope it's been okay for you. I'm glad to be back with all of you guys. I'll see you in the next video. Just be good, try to behave, right? Don't do a lot of mess in the weekend, right? And see you in the next video. Bye bye, guys. Be good.